February is one of the sparkly months. I think it's the combination of the season of romance, cozy snow days, and the promise of warmer months. In bulk, St. Bridget's Feast and Candlemas are variations on the February midwinter tradition of celebrating the halfway point between the winter solstice and spring equinox. The goddess Bridget and the Christian Saint Bridget share many attributes, bringing healing and protection and prosperity.
The sunlight dances on the balcony as I wait for thee to come home. I fumble my words, yeah, my mind's a mess when you're in that dress. Glad you're home. Will you stay with me and never leave? You walked into my life and I am glad you came. Glad you came. When you're not around, I feel broken. Glad you came. Glad you came. I was lost till I fell in your eyes. Had me wondering why I feel like home. I hold you close so you're by my side till the end of time. Before we go, will you stay with me and never leave? You walked into my life and I am glad you came. Glad you came. When you're not around, I feel broken. Glad you came. Glad you came. Glad you came.
Happy Midwinter. I had like 17 cups left over from that lavender syrup for the cake, so I put it in my tea. It's quite nice. Time for the taste test. This is the lemon curd tarts. I'm really excited about these. I tasted a little bit of the lemon curd and it was really good. Very delicious. Really nice tanginess. The tart is a little hard, little rock solid, but that's alright. Pancake I'm really curious about. I've never really had anything like this. Again, really nice flavors. Questionable dough. It has the texture of like scallion pancakes, and I think it was supposed to be crunchy, which it is not at all. It is very tasty. Cake was supposed to be 4-layer. Mine are 2 very dense layers. If anybody has any tips on how to get your cake to rise, my cakes always come out so gummy. The frosting tastes like something from my childhood. It's Zeppole. My grandfather would always get Zeppole for the Feast of St. Joseph. I've been wanting to do a midwinter feast for so long, and I'm so happy I finally did it. I love old traditions and ways of marking seasons, and we're at the halfway point between winter and spring, so the sun is setting a little bit later every day. It's not dark at 4 o'clock anymore. Good things. So I wanted to share some of my favorite romance books and movies. I think when romance is done well, it is the best genre. So these are what I think are the best. Well, actually, okay, if I had to say my top 4 favorite romance movies, they would be Moonstruck, Now Voyager, A Room with a View, and Casablanca. But I've already discussed those movies at length on this channel, and I want to keep things fresh. So I'm going to talk about some other movies that I think are up there in my Mount Rushmore romance movies. So the first movie is Love and Basketball. This is a coming of age story about 2 childhood friends who grow up and fall in love and have to navigate their passion for basketball and their passion for each other and their own kind of ambition as they move out of high school into college. This is a very tender movie that deals with very important subject matter. It explores ideas of women in sports and the challenges they face and standards for Black masculinity and Black femininity and how those interact with sport, and just very human themes of ambition and passion. There's a genuine intimacy and sensuality between these characters. Like, it's a romance that I really believe in and want to root for. This movie is also really in love with basketball. It's like a great sports movie, and I like all the different kind of ideas of romance it explores. Being in love with your own possibility and your own dreams, and also being in love with another person, and the foundation of that romance being a very loving friendship. I think a sports drama like this is a really fantastic vehicle for a coming-of-age story. It's just very nostalgic and heartwarming and just really well done. Great soundtrack, great movie. But I'm a Cheerleader is a 1990s teen rom-com starring Natasha Lyonne, who plays a high school girl who is sent by her parents to a sexual redirection school because they're afraid that she is a lesbian. And it sounds like it could be a very heavy movie, but it's actually very campy and ridiculous. I love the way that they approach the subject matter in this movie. It's just so ridiculous and fun and absurd, but also, again, really grounded in human emotion. Something I really like about this movie, so it's set in the 1950s, somewhat abstractly, but it's very heavily influenced by like ideals of Americana and the American dream, particularly like the suburban American dream in the 50s. And I really appreciate when movies are really specific about the period that they're in, and they're not just addressing social issues as this binary of good and bad, but are really considering and thinking about why people held these beliefs, where this fear or hatred came from. And their approach to homophobia in this movie is really about the anxiety around gender roles and gender norms and the kind of ideal family and the ideal American life in the 50s. And it really thinks about, or makes you think about, why those standards were so important to people, why people felt like they had to uphold them, why abnormality felt so uncomfortable in that time, why queerness felt like such a threat. Not just that people were homophobic because they were hateful or because they were bad, but because they were afraid of something collapsing and afraid of disruption to social order, and why social order was so important. Like, just all of those kinds of layers. I found this to be so entertaining, but also very thought-provoking. And it's also just a star-studded cast. The sets are incredible. I read that they were really inspired by like the old Barbie movies and Edward Scissorhands, which is just like an incredible marriage of aesthetic. So if you haven't seen it, bit of a cult classic, was destroyed by the critics at the time, which, you know, if it's a queer, happy movie that critics don't like, it's worth checking out. Your Name is a 2016 Japanese animated fantasy romance, and this movie has some of the most beautiful animation I have ever seen. It is stunning. I also find this movie to be incredibly moving. I don't even want to say that much about it because it's such a journey and takes so many unexpected twists and turns. It's basically about two high school students who realize they can switch bodies and go on this kind of kismet journey of spirituality and heritage and fantasy and time travel. And it's just a really beautiful film and is so incredibly immersive and captivating and enthralling, and just is a really fresh, cool take on the kind of existing YA teen romance canon. For me, it's just one of those movies that makes you feel so alive and like makes you feel so in love with being alive, and has really endearing moments of adolescent awkwardness and teen angst and just all of those really funny, delightful, embarrassing aspects of growing into yourself. My Favorite Wife is a screwball comedy starring Cary Grant and Irene Dunne. The more I watch this movie, the higher it climbs on my rankings of greatest movies of all time. This movie is so funny. The premise of this is that Cary Grant's wife, played by Irene Dunne, is thought to have been lost at sea and returns home right as Cary Grant has just remarried. It's so absurd. It's so unexpected. Cary Grant is so funny in this. I still don't think it's his funniest performance. That would be Arsenic and Old Lace, but this is definitely up there. There's just something that feels so modern, almost like not even timeless, but just current in the way that it lands jokes and builds a scene. Irene Dunne is so funny in this, and it's so subtle and dry. The little things that she like mutters off to the side, or even just like her little facial expressions, like I appreciate it more and more every time I watch it. It gets funnier and funnier, which is, I think, partly why it's funny almost 100 years later. And I also just really like their relationship. I mean, the premise obviously is so ridiculous, and they still manage to tell a story about a couple that I find really winning and compelling. There are also two kids in the movie, and I think especially in this time period, kids can kind of be so kind of cutesy, all-American, cookie-cutter kids, and the kids in this movie are really weird. The performances are really fantastic. In screwball comedies, there often aren't kids involved, and I think this movie includes children in a way that I don't usually see done in this kind of setup, and just adds so much like entertainment and heart to the story. Now for books. My first recommendation is a book called You Deserve Each Other. I want to be thoughtful about how I phrase this. I think there's been a trend in contemporary romance novels to move away from the kind of toxic romantic dynamics that defined the genre for so long. And I'm absolutely for that. I don't want nor need to read any romance novels that romanticize or eroticize really problematic, unhealthy relationship dynamics and really gender essentialist characterizations of human beings. The sense I get, and this is a small sample size and based really just on vibes, it feels a little bit like people are thinking about how the internet will react to the stories that they write, and the internet is not the best place for discourse and discussion, and the internet feeds off of outrage and reactionary chaos. And I struggle to find contemporary romance novels with characters that feel real and feel human in all of the ways and have real conflict. Like, the characters in the last 10 romance novels that I've read never fight. There's no problem that ever occurs between the two of them. Everything is circumstantial. It usually comes down to the fact that they just don't want to admit that they have feelings, and the reasons for that are super unclear. But there's never any good tension. And part of the compelling parts of romance is the self-reflection and coming of age, coming to self that it often invites. And that's a really long-winded way of saying that this book I love so much because the characters are flawed, they are messy, they make a lot of mistakes, they're not even particularly likable at the start of the book, but there's really strong character development, there's really strong just story arc and story development where you end up really rooting for these characters to be together when the first pages of the books make you think, oh my god, these two people should never, ever be together. And I think achieving that is really hard, and whether or not my theories about the evolution of the romance genre are correct, I do struggle to find it. This book is about a young couple who is engaged and have kind of completely fallen out of love with each other and are trying to get the other one to break up with them through a series of pranks and sabotage. So the other one has to take the financial blow from canceling their wedding. These just felt like real people. They felt like people that I know. There were parts of their story that I related to. Their growth I found inspiring and I found very real. The whole thing, it just really worked for me. And it's super cozy. I think I read this pretty much all in one sitting. It was so engaging and fun. Yeah, this is basically the only adult contemporary romance that I like, that I can think of that right now that I would recommend. And I read them all the time, and I get mad at them all the time. And this one's good. Excuse Me While I Ugly Cry is a YA high school kind of enemies to lovers romance about a girl who makes a lot of lists. She has a big to-do list that she never intends on completing because she's too scared to do any of it, and it falls into the wrong hands and she starts being blackmailed to do the stuff on her list. So it's a coming of age, kind of getting out of your comfort zone story. It's just really beautiful. I really liked this so much more than I expected to. I read this book at least 3 years ago, and I still think about it, and I still think about how much I love it, and I still remember it, which says a lot. It takes on very important, difficult subject matter, deals with racism and microaggressions and prejudice and stereotypes. The connection that the two love interests share, I think, is really important and really beautiful. Overall, the arc of their relationship is really beautiful. Again, this deals with people who are imperfect and who do mess up, but is not toxic. Feels very real overall, but is still a very optimistic and celebratory book. A Faux Love Story is another teen romance. Usually the teen romances do it for me way better than the adult romances. This is about two kids who are part of feuding families who run competing pho restaurants. This is not the most genius brilliant character development, complex story book ever, but it was just so delightful. It's another one that I read a long time ago and still think about and think like, man, I really loved that book. It's just a world that you want to live in. It's also so delicious. Even for the food alone, it's worth it. The descriptions of food are so delicious. It's like eating your favorite meal. This book is just so warm and yummy. But I also really like the characterizations of the boy and girl. Their names are Bao and Lin. Lin is very ambitious, very self-assured, very confident, and Bao is a little bit more uncertain of himself and where he fits in and what he wants. And I just really liked that dynamic. I think that usually the gender roles are reversed with those dynamics, or if a female has a lot of ambition or drive or certainty, she's often portrayed as particularly neurotic and kind of isolated and not a very personable person, because her ambition, it like interferes with her ability to be likable as a woman. But Lin is very vibrant and outgoing and just an open personality, and I just found that really refreshing because I'm so tired of reading about uptight women and their chill love interest. Last recommendation is The Tenant of Wildfeld Hall. This is an Anne Bronte novel, and I'm actually not the biggest fan of the Bronte sisters. I've read Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, and I'm not the biggest fans. They're not bad necessarily. I just find them so exhausting and uninspiring, and there's just something about the solemnity and melancholy and macabre of those books that I just find tedious. So I had very low expectations going into this book, and I ended up loving it because it's basically the opposite of all of that. It's a very interesting structure. Basically, a young man, I don't remember his name, a local gentleman falls in love with the new tenant of Wildfeld Hall. She gives him her diaries. So most of the book is her diaries recounting her relationship with an abusive husband, which was very not commonly written about in the 1840s. And Helen Graham, the tenant, is a very beautiful, secretive woman who's very harshly judged by the community. And this exposure of her diary and her deepest, innermost pains and tragedies and experiences are incredibly revealing and moving within the story itself and as a reader. Yeah, this just is a groundbreaking piece of writing. It's incredibly radical. It's incredibly ahead of its time, really pushing the envelope, really challenging the idea of what stories about women can be and how women tell their stories. Gilbert. His name is Gilbert. Anyway, it's not the most romantic book, really, because it's mostly recounting this intensely troubled marriage, but overall, it is a hopeful and moving tale. You may note that I did not discuss any Jane Austen books for this. One, because I don't think I need to recommend Jane Austen books. I think everybody's familiar. But also because I believe, and I'm going to be really stubborn about this, that Jane Austen didn't write romance books. She wrote social satires. And I think when you really look at the Jane Austen books and give them just a little bit of thought, they're not particularly optimistic about marriage and about having to be with a man. Anyway, nobody really asked, but so those are my romance movies and books. I hope you heard a recommendation of something you didn't know. Oh, as always, share recommendations with me, especially good contemporary romance novels, and I mean actually good ones, and you know what I mean by that. And I hope February is a little bit sparkly for you.